If I had known back then what I know now, maybe I would have asked more questions. Maybe I would have listened to my silence more than to his words. But women from my time were taught to trust blindly and to keep going even when their hearts whispered doubts. Before I start, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing that my story is reaching different places. Back then, marriage was every proper girl's dream. We grew up embroidering our own trousseaux, memorizing the name of the man we thought would carry our future. The idea of tomorrow was always tied to someone else's shadow, never to our own name. He showed up on an ordinary day, but brought a sparkle in his eye that disarmed me. He had a soft voice, a confident manner, and a kind of politeness that charmed even strangers. He called me lovely without exaggeration, special without making promises, and that was enough for me to believe. The proposal came after a few visits to my doorstep. My mother served coffee, my father gave his quiet approval. And I said yes, like someone accepting life, without knowing the weight that would come with that thin ring sliding onto my finger like a sealed fate. We started our life together the way most did. A small house, a wood stove, dirt floors, hand-me-down furniture, but I was happy. I sang while washing clothes, baked bread with what little we had, and every night waited for him to come home with longing in my eyes. He said he worked out of town, had to travel often, and I believed him. I stayed behind for days, never complaining, prepared the meals he liked, kept everything tidy, thinking that love lived in the details. I thought being a wife meant caring even without company. Now and then, he brought home a gift, a nice dish towel, a perfume, a souvenir from a town I'd never visit, and I smiled, saving each item like a treasure, told myself it meant he thought of me, even when he was gone, even when he was absent. With time came the children, the yard smelling of soap, clothes on the line. Life seemed peaceful. Everyone said I was a lucky woman, that my husband was hard-working, that he provided. And I, between the wash basin and the stove, convinced myself of that too. But there were gaps, small, yet persistent. Days without a word from him, excuses that didn't add up, half-heard names, unfamiliar scents on his shirt, and more than anything, that look in his eye, the one that avoided mine when I asked where he'd been. Still, I stayed silent. In those days, a woman who asked too many questions was called bitter, and I wanted to be sweet, understanding, strong. So I swallowed the unease like bitter medicine, without letting a single tear slip from my eye. Years went by like that, decades perhaps, living with an inner restlessness I couldn't name but felt deeply. I became quieter, more serious, stopped singing while I cooked, stopped waiting for his return with the warmth I once had. And still, I never imagined what was truly happening. The truth came to my door unexpectedly. It arrived as a woman, calm, polite, but with a face marked by time, like mine. She said she needed to talk, that it wasn't easy to be there, that his name was also part of her life. It felt like the ground had disappeared from under my feet. She spoke of another home, other children, holidays spent by his side. Absences explained the same way I had heard them. She didn't know about me. I didn't know about her, but we both knew him. My body didn't react. My voice didn't rise. I just listened, looked at her, and pieced together fragments of memory, trying to understand how someone could live two lives for so long. When he came home that night, he looked at me without saying much. I didn't need to ask. He simply said, "You always had everything you needed," as if that justified 40 years of deception. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of him. I went into the bedroom, closed the door, and there, alone, I wept for everything I had locked away over the years. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about lost time, about dreams I never dreamed because I was too busy believing in his. Now, with white hair and slower steps, I've decided to tell my story, not to make noise or provoke pity, but to make one thing clear. Behind every quiet woman, there may be a story the world never wanted to hear. 2. The beginning was sweet, as it often was back then. There was a certain simplicity to everything, a sense of wonder in the smallest things. No luxury, no glamorous photographs, but there was intention. And that intention was to live together, to share whatever came, be it little or much. I still remember the light blue dress my mother sewed from fabric bought at the street market. It was simple, but made with care. I wore it with borrowed shoes and a smile full of belief. The ceremony was small, held in the little church up the road. Open windows, the bell ringing, the smell of flowers mixed with melting candle wax. And he was there, waiting at the altar, looking at me like he saw an entire future. During the vows, he held my hand firmly, spoke of love, of partnership, of never leaving. He said I was different, that this was forever. And in that moment, everything made sense. Because when you're young and in love, someone's words feel strong enough to hold up the whole world. In those early months, there was tenderness. He called me my girl, praised my cooking, said it was good to come home and find me there. He'd bring flowers from the road, play with my hair, tell me he dreamed of watching me grow old by his side. And I dreamed right along with him. We had little, but we laughed a lot, slept holding each other even on hot nights, shared the last piece of bread without hesitation. The bills were tight, but the promises made life feel wide. He'd always say, "Things will get better soon, you'll see." And I did. I saw it through his eyes. Every time he needed to travel, he said it was for us, that one day we'd have a bigger house, a fruit tree in the yard, a porch to sit on in the evening. He said he pictured me surrounded by grandchildren, rocking in a chair, telling stories. And I believed every word, because his eyes told the same story as his mouth. I did my part with joy, took care of the house, made his favorite meals, kept everything ready for his return, decorated the table with flowers from the garden, scented the sheets with lavender. At night, I waited for him like it was always the first date. It was a devotion born from the feeling of being loved, because in those days, a little affection was enough to make a woman bloom. And I bloomed, even through the drought. All it took was a note tucked in the cupboard, a keepsake from the road, a gentle, "Be back soon." But deep down, there was a shadow, a small one at first, but it grew. It was his absence, though always explained, his travels, though always justified, the timings that sometimes didn't add up. And still, I quieted that voice inside me, because to me, love also meant knowing how to wait. His promise was clear: I'm yours, and you're mine. And with that sentence, I built castles. What I didn't know was that he said the same thing while looking at more than one horizon, that the castles I dreamed of were, in truth, divided homes. But back then, I couldn't have imagined such a thing, because when you love in the dark, even the slightest light feels like truth. 3. Life back then was made of repetition. Waking early to the rooster's crow, lighting the fire before the sun had fully stretched across the sky. The coffee water bubbled in the kettle while I swept the hard kitchen floor. Everything had its time, its rhythm, its silence. The routine was like a song with no chorus, no highs, no lows, just steady. And I moved along with it. The children came one by one, each bringing more work and less time for myself. I welcomed them with love, never afraid of the tiredness. They were my pride, my reason, my distraction from the absences that were already becoming routine. While he worked far away, I held everything together here. I kept the books, tended to sickness, cleaned the house, raised the children, stitched clothes, even climbed up to fix roof tiles with hammer and nails. If the house was small, my effort was enormous. He came home now and then, full of work stories, always with that look of someone carrying the weight of the world. I would prepare his favorite meal, lay out the nice tablecloth, scent the house as if we were expecting an honored guest. It was my way of showing gratitude for his return, even if brief. There was affection, yes, don't get me wrong. It wasn't a marriage of shouting or fighting. Quite the opposite. It was a marriage of silence, a polished, quiet, almost beautiful silence. But inside me, something hollow began to take root. I just didn't know its name yet. In the village, they said we were a respectable couple, that I was a lucky woman. You've got a husband who works, who provides, who doesn't drink or raise his hand. What more could you want? And I smiled on the outside. Inside, I didn't even know what I wanted. The truth is, I had everything the world told me was enough: house, husband, children. But something was missing that I couldn't put into words. It was as if I had forgotten myself inside everyone else's life, as if my existence was just the background to everyone else's story. Some nights I'd sit on the doorstep after the children were asleep. I'd sit there, cup in hand, listening to the crickets, staring down the dark road. And I'd wonder, Where is he right now? With whom? Thinking of what? But those thoughts I buried deep. There was no room for doubt. Doubt was seen as ungratefulness, as weakness, and I had to be strong. Always. The years passed. We aged slowly without noticing. The children grew, the wrinkles came, life tied itself into a knot no one dared untangle. And so, between laundry, meals on the stove, and Sunday visits, life was lived, even with his absence ebbing and flowing like the tide, even as my heart learned to live with it, like one learns to live with old pain. I told myself, this is mature love. Love that doesn't need constant presence, grown-up love. But today I know that wasn't love. It was just habit, and habit is dangerous. It teaches us to accept what we don't deserve. 4. Absence, when it arrives slowly, feels like a polite guest. You even make space for it. Move the furniture, shrink yourself, let it settle in without much noise. And that's how it was with me. He said work called him, that he needed to travel, to take care of things elsewhere. And I understood. Or pretended to understand, because women back then weren't taught to doubt. We were taught to accept. At first, it was 2 days, then 4, then an entire week. And when I asked, he said it was all to ensure the family's future. And I, with children in my lap and beans on the stove, believed him. Because love, when it's blind, doesn't ask, it trusts. I remember once, clear as day, he disappeared on our youngest son's birthday. I had baked a cake, decorated the house with paper flowers, invited the neighbors. I told everyone he was on his way. I waited until the last candle melted, and nothing. The next day, he showed up with a new radio and a kiss on my forehead, said he got caught up at work, and I accepted. Again. Another time, it was Christmas. He said he had to go to the city to sort out a payment and would be back in 2 days. He returned on the 4th, brought gifts, new clothes, a smile. We didn't speak of it again. The truth is, he learned how to disappear, and I learned how to explain it away. It became a silent agreement between us. He lied gracefully, and I pretended to believe him sweetly. My friends in the village used to say every man needed space, that it was normal for husbands to breathe outside the home now and then. Some said the important thing was that he came back, and he did, didn't he? Yes, he always came back smelling of another soap, with his shirts folded differently, with stories that didn't quite add up, but he came. And I made the bed again, boiled the water, welcomed him as if he were always the same man, as if crossing that doorway erased everything I didn't want to see. What hurts most now isn't his absence, it's mine. I disappeared so there wouldn't be friction. I set aside my intuition, my questions, my unease, all in the name of harmony. But what kind of harmony forces a woman to live in half? His absences became normal, and that was the worst part. Because when the abnormal becomes routine, you stop realizing you're being wounded. 5. The first doubts didn't come with drama. They arrived like a soft breeze, the kind that barely moves the curtain, but still makes you look up. A delay here, a scent that wasn't mine, a silence longer than usual. But every time something inside me wanted to ask, I answered for him myself. I told myself, he's just tired. That's just how men are. He's doing it all for the family. And maybe that was true, or at least I wanted it to be. The desire to keep the peace was stronger than the courage to face the doubt. There was a shirt with lipstick on the collar. He said it was the store girl. She bumped into him by accident. Another time, a note left in his pants pocket. I'll wait for you at the usual place. He said it was old, couldn't even remember where it came from. And I, heart tight in my chest, chose to believe him. It was easier. Simpler to move forward than to open a door I wouldn't know how to close. Women of my generation were raised that way, to doubt in silence, to stay quiet, to protect the family's name, even if it cost them their own. So I started gathering clues and hiding them inside myself, like someone keeping a secret they don't want to know. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, not the neighbors, not even God in prayer, because if I said it out loud, it would become real. And I didn't want it to be. He was the same, or nearly. He brought gifts, remembered dates, said he loved me, and that was enough to keep up appearances. Because women learn early that sometimes appearances are what hold the structure together. But there were days his eyes avoided mine, days His hands trembled, putting the key in the door. Days, his kiss carried no weight at all. And I felt it. The body always knows before the mind. The heart always whispers. But we silence that whisper in the name of survival. I don't know if it was fear or love or just plain exhaustion, but I didn't dig deeper. I didn't investigate. I didn't confront. I lowered my eyes, took a deep breath, and carried on. 6. Keeping the peace sometimes requires a silence that hurts more than any fight. I knew something was out of place, but choosing conflict wasn't something a proper woman did. And I was raised to belong to the home, quiet, obedient, devoted. His excuses started to feel rehearsed. There was always an explanation ready, and I, even tasting the bitterness of the lie, swallowed it. Out of fear, out of shame, out of love perhaps, or simply out of habit. He once said he missed the bus back. Another time that he slept at a friend's house. He claimed he got sick, ran a fever, or that a storm kept him from returning. And me? I made the bed, warmed the food, and pretended to believe him, because admitting the truth would force me to face a world I wasn't ready to see, a world where I wasn't the only one, where his loyalty was nothing more than a paper promise. Some days, he returned with his head down. I could tell he was silently asking for forgiveness, and I accepted it, not because I thought it was right, but because I no longer knew where the fault truly lay, in him for lying, or in me for accepting it. There were the children, the home, the bills, the neighbors watching. Divorce back then was a filthy word. A woman who left her husband was seen as rebellious, ungrateful, a failure. So I stayed. I stayed for everyone, except for myself. I stayed because scandal frightened more than silent pain. I stayed because I chose to protect the image instead of facing the truth. I stayed because peace, even a false one, still felt lighter than emptiness. I became good at not seeing, at smiling with my lips and staying quiet with my eyes, at embracing a routine that hurt, but was mine. And so I lived, collecting excuses like old photographs, faded but full of stories. Stories that deep down I always knew weren't whole. But I clung to them, because admitting otherwise meant admitting I was never chosen alone. 7. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't an anonymous letter. It wasn't a confession from him. It was a gentle knock on the door on an ordinary afternoon, with sunlight already slipping through the cracks in the window. I was sitting down, hemming a tablecloth, when I heard it. Thought it might be a neighbor, a seller, someone asking for directions. I opened the door with the cloth still in my hand. There stood a woman, stern face, steady posture, but polite. Her eyes carried the weight of age, and her hands trembled like mine. Before I could say a word, she asked, "Are you the wife of Mr.?" and spoke his name like someone breaking a wall in half. I couldn't answer right away. The world seemed to empty out. Her voice was calm, but her words were not. She spoke of another home, other children, years, Sundays, birthdays, holidays when he had told me he had to travel. And where was he really? With her, with theirs. My breath grew shallow. My body turned to stone. I listened to everything without saying a word. She spoke like someone apologizing for existing, but also like someone who needed to be heard. She said she had only discovered me weeks earlier, that she had been in shock, that it took courage to come. She didn't come with anger. She came with truth, and truth, when it arrives clean, wounds deeper than any filthy lie. I didn't cry, not in that moment. I closed the door with a quiet, "Thank you for coming," and sat down in the same chair. Looked at the tablecloth in my lap and thought, my entire life had been stitched in silence, and now it had torn without warning. When he came home that night, I didn't need to ask. He saw in my eyes that I knew. He sat at the edge of the bed, lowered his head, and said, "You were never without anything." That hurt more than if he had yelled, because in that moment I understood. He thought love was physical presence, food on the table, bills paid. He never understood that love is truth, whole, even when it hurts. That night we slept under the same roof, but in different worlds. It was the day I discovered everything, and at the same time, I realized maybe I had never had anything at all. 8. In the days that followed, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't tell a soul. I made the coffee the same way, hung the clothes on the line like always, prayed before bed with cold hands and a chest on fire. But inside, everything had turned upside down. My mind refused to accept it. I kept telling myself maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the other woman had lied. I clung to that doubt like a final rope over an abyss, because accepting the truth meant admitting my whole life had been split, and I didn't know how to live with that weight. I looked at him like he was a stranger, and at the same time, I forced myself to see the same man I'd always seen. It was a battle inside my own eyes. The things he said now sounded hollow. His good morning tasted like nothing. His tender gestures felt like rehearsed scenes from a play, but I pretended not to see. I felt foolish on the inside, but on the outside, I kept the house in order, as if that still meant dignity. In the village, the neighbors kept greeting us as a model couple. People spoke well of him, of our children, of our home, and that hurt me more than any cruel word ever could. I even wondered if I was overreacting, if I should just forgive and forget, if it was just a man's slip, like they used to say back then. That's when I realized the cruelest part of betrayal isn't the act itself. It's the time it steals from you, the time you spend trying to doubt your pain just to keep breathing. I scrubbed the house harder, as if I could sweep what he did to me out of my soul. But the dirt wasn't on the floor. It was inside me, and with each attempt to deny it, it spread even further. 9. After the discovery, there was no fight, no yelling, no slammed doors or packed bags. There was silence, a thick silence that spread through the house like cold fog. I didn't want to argue, didn't want to hear excuses, and more than anything, I didn't want anyone else to know. In my mind, everything was tangled. The shame was so heavy, I chose silence. I stayed silent with him, silent with the children, silent with myself. I woke up, put the kettle on, swept the yard, answered what I had to, and returned to my corner. We slept under the same roof, shared the same table, but I was no longer fully there. Part of me had left, and he felt it, but said nothing. Maybe it was fear that silenced me, maybe pride, or maybe the certainty that if I started talking, I wouldn't be able to stop. I needed time to understand what to do with the pain, because forgiveness wasn't a simple word, and forgetting, even less. For a while, the silence protected me. It was like a shell, a space where I could breathe without having to explain anything to anyone. The neighbors noticed something had changed. Some asked gently, others whispered behind closed doors. I answered with a soft smile and a steady voice. Everything's fine. And no one pushed further. Because a weathered woman learns to smile with sad eyes without raising suspicion. I stayed quiet because speaking meant risking collapse. And at that time, I just wanted to stay standing. Few people understand that the worst kind of loneliness isn't being alone. It's sharing a roof with someone and still going to bed with emptiness. Emptiness in conversation, emptiness in the eyes, emptiness in hands that no longer touch with honesty. After the discovery, I began living with that kind of loneliness. It wasn't the absence of his body, because he was still there, sitting at the table, walking through the yard, lying in the same bed. But his soul was already elsewhere. The routine continued. I still made lunch. He still said, "Thank you." But the words were cold, rootless, as if we were performing an old script just to keep the house from falling. There was a silence between us, but it wasn't the same as before. Before, the silence was comforting. Now, it was distance. He didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't demand it. We were trapped in a silent pact. He pretended he hadn't broken me, and I pretended I was still whole. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and look at him sleeping beside me. I'd think, how can someone sleep so peacefully while the other is falling apart inside? On some mornings, while he left to take care of things, I'd sit at the edge of the bed and wonder if he would ever truly return. But I already knew the answer. He could come back 1,000 times and still not be here. The loneliness inside a marriage is the cruelest kind of pain, because no one sees it. You're accompanied, carry his last name, set the table for two, but it's like living on an empty stage. And the worst part is, you get used to it. You learn to talk to yourself, to stop expecting affection, to survive alone. But inside, the heart, it whispers its sorrow every single day. 11. It happened on an ordinary day, no special date. It wasn't a birthday or a holiday. I simply stopped in front of the mirror, like someone who sees herself by accident, and truly looked for the first time in many years. The woman in the reflection had wrinkles, tired eyes, silver threads in her hair. But that's not what startled me. What hurt was realizing I didn't recognize her. That woman. Was that really me? The one who stayed silent to keep the house together? The one who smiled when she wanted to scream? The one who cared for everyone and forgot herself? I began to remember who I was before him. The young woman who laughed out loud, who loved yellow flowers, who dreamed of seeing the ocean. Where had she gone? I saw how small I had made myself for so long that I had become a shadow inside my own story. And that frightened me more than his betrayal. Because his lie, I couldn't control. But what I let myself become, that was on me, even if I hadn't realized it. I sat on the porch, alone. I looked at the sky. I looked at my hands. I looked at my past. And in that moment, I understood. He lied to me. But I had also lied to myself. I lied when I said I was fine. I lied when I accepted crumbs and called it a feast. I lied when I called it love, when it was only fear and habit. And for the first time, I wanted to find myself again. Not for him, not for the children, but for me. 12. I didn't throw anything away. I didn't burn clothes. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't run down the street shouting. The pain in me didn't become a storm. It became thread. Stitch by stitch, I began mending what was left of me. I started with the small things, woke up a little earlier, chose a teacup just for me, found a corner of the house to call my own, opened the old notebook where I used to write poems as a girl. That's how it began, by returning to myself what had always been mine, but had been forgotten. The pain didn't vanish, and I never expected it to, but it changed places. It stopped controlling me and started walking beside me. It became a shadow, not a chain. I started taking care of myself the same way I always cared for others. I did my own hair, wore perfume even with no visitors, read books that had gathered dust for years. At first, I admit, I felt guilty, as if feeling better, even a little, was some kind of betrayal of my sadness. But then I understood. Rebuilding myself wasn't selfish. It was survival. The neighbors noticed something had changed. Some said, "You seem lighter." Others whispered, "Do you think she forgave him?" But no one knew what I knew. No one knew how deeply it hurt. No one knew the price of my silence. I knew I couldn't change the past or undo what had been done. But what I did with the pain, that was my decision. And I chose to move forward, in my own way, in my own time, with dignity. 13. He left on a quiet morning, like everything he did, without fanfare, without long goodbyes, without confession. It was as if he had just stepped out for another of his trips. Only this time, he didn't return. He woke, drank his coffee in silence, looked out the window longer than usual. Then he walked into the backyard, as he always did. And there, among the trees and the scent of damp soil, he fell, silently. That's how it ended. I didn't cry right away. I did what needed to be done, called for help, gathered the documents, informed the children, made coffee for those who came, welcomed the neighbors, accepted the embraces. The pain came later, in the evening, when the house emptied. I sat alone in the rocking chair he never used and stared at the floor. And I cried, not just for the death. I cried for the time spent without truth. I cried for the woman I was, the one I left behind, and for all the words we never spoke. But in that same cry, there was relief. Yes, relief. Not because he had gone, but because I no longer had to pretend, because I could finally be silent, without guilt. After he left, the house felt different, not sadder, just more mine. I began organizing drawers, undoing the corners where he kept his secrets. I found photographs, old letters, objects that didn't belong to me. I wasn't surprised. It only confirmed what my heart had long known. I mourned not just him. I mourned me. I mourned the life I imagined, the love I idealized, the family that looked complete and never was. But in time, I realized what remained was peace. A strange peace at first, but a true one. The peace of no longer waiting for anyone. The peace of having chosen, after everything, to keep standing. 14. If today a woman sat in front of me with tired eyes and a heart cracked in half, I wouldn't speak with anger. I wouldn't speak with bitterness. I'd speak with the calm of someone who's walked through dark places and came out alive on the other side. I'd say this: you're not crazy. What hurt you is real. What you kept silent has weight, and what you endured quietly, that too is part of your story. Many will try to tell you it's normal, that every marriage has shadows, that men are just like that the important thing is to keep the family together. But between keeping appearances and keeping your soul, choose your soul. Because no one sleeps peacefully on a pillow made of lies. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to shout, you don't need to take revenge, but you also don't need to pretend. Your worth doesn't lessen because someone failed to see it. Your dignity isn't in what you tolerate, it's in what you choose to rebuild afterward. I stayed, and for a long time, I thought that was bravery. Now I know true bravery would have been choosing myself sooner, but I don't blame myself anymore. Every woman has her own time, her own limit, her own path, and only those who've lived the pain know the weight of the choice to keep going. So if you've lived something like this, or are living it now, know this: you're not alone. And you don't deserve to live half a life. Even when everything seems lost, you can still find yourself. Even when love is gone, there's still room for rebirth. And sometimes, the greatest love we ever live is the one that begins the moment we finally see ourselves with truth. If you liked Grandma's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you can hear more stories like this and share them with other people who might be inspired by this story of overcoming. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a similar situation? How did you react? A kiss on the heart from all of you. And until the next story.